Hi, I'm Dave Thomas of New Mexicans for Science and Reason, NMSR, and I'm here with our response to the first part of a YouTube debate that we are having with Vernon 9/11 Truth. Previously, Michael Fullerton has said the official story must be wrong and that the Twin Towers collapsed because of a controlled demolition. However, his entire case is built on huge logical fallacies. Let's take a look.
The official story of how the towers fell on 9/11 does not have a single, solitary piece of supporting scientific evidence. None at all. The 9/11 Commission report contains no technical information whatsoever. The NIST report on the Twin Tower collapses provides sketchy evidence only for the collapse initiations and not the falls of the Twin Towers themselves. The official story is therefore 100% pseudoscience.
Mr. Fullerton commits not one but multiple logical fallacies. For example, the black and white logical fallacy, or the false dilemma, in which one is forced to choose between one of two possible outcomes when in fact there may be many possible outcomes. Mr. Fullerton says that if the collapses were not explained adequately by either the 9/11 Commission report or the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, then it must have been a controlled demolition. This is a huge black and white fallacy, omitting the very serious analyses and examinations by groups like Northwestern University, Cambridge University, Purdue, Weidlinger Associates, the Z-Axis Corporation, and many others. I consider the real official story to be simply the mainstream scientific consensus that terrorists hijacked airplanes, flew them into the towers, and that the structural damage and damage from the fires caused the collapses of both towers. Mr. Fullerton also commits another logical fallacy, the straw man fallacy, in which the actual argument is misrepresented so that it can be more easily defeated. Also, dismissing the mainstream scientific consensus by denigrating the official version is itself another logical fallacy, the genetic fallacy, in which the very source of an argument is used to justify its dismissal. So let's look at Mr. Fullerton's actual technical arguments. First, the collapses of the Twin Towers.
The rapid fall times and highly symmetric descents of the Twin Towers currently are only explainable by the use of some form of controlled demolition.
There have been many, many detailed technical analyses of the collapses of the Twin Towers. These include Northwestern University, Cambridge University, which was the home of Sir Isaac Newton, the founder of physics. So if I implied that the Cambridge study was correct because it came from the home of Isaac Newton, that would be a logical fallacy, the argument from authority. That would be wrong. But Mr. Fullerton is hugely wrong when he implies that the University of Cambridge study simply doesn't exist. Let's take a look at the output of the analysis of Z-Axis Associates and their very careful examination of the collapses of the Twin Towers. I'm going to tell you about the details of just one of these many analyses. Not Northwestern's, not Cambridge's, not Z-Axis Associates, but mine. I got interested in 9/11 Truth while debating Richard Gage at New Mexico Tech back in 2009. And then I proceeded to develop a detailed physical model before I debated Gage again in 2010 on Coast to Coast AM radio. I started doing lots of physics experiments to see what happens when heavy things fall onto other things. I found that a small bag of rice that weighed a mere fraction of 1 ounce had an apparent weight of 5 ounces after falling just a few inches. A 3-pound bag of rice turned out to have an impact of over 13 pounds, and that was falling as a loose pile of rubble for a couple of feet. I used conservation of energy and of momentum to derive an equation for how hard things hit when they are dropped on other things. The theory compares very well to experiment again and again for dropping from 2 inches, from 4 inches, from 9 inches, from 16 inches. In my simple model, a sagging truss pulls the perimeter walls inward until they snap. As the upper section falls through the height of the failed floor, it gathers speed, falling around the still stationary core and pushing the perimeter walls outward. The upper section gathers speed as it falls through every failed floor and slows down just a bit as the connections are broken as the upper section impacts another floor. There is substantial evidence that the perimeter walls were pushed outward, as I've described, and also that the towers collapsed around the cores. The parts of the cores called the spires can be seen in several videos from September 11th. The brief resistance encountered as each floor was crushed slowed the collapses slightly, much as running through grass slows one down compared to running on a proper track. David Chandler measured the first 4 seconds of World Trade Center 1's fall, and it found it to proceed at 2/3 gravitational acceleration. My model also predicted this less than free fall rate. David Chandler's measurements verify my model. Here are the results of my model superimposed on a real video of the collapse of World Trade Center 1. Notice that the red objects off to the side represent objects in true free fall, and they fall faster than the towers. You can see the bottom of the blue section represents the collapse front, and that matches the actual collapse front very well. Well, that explains the rapid fall times part of Mr. Fullerton's argument, and it has been confirmed by scientists who have put far more work into it than I have. Now I'd like to consider the symmetry parts of Mr. Fullerton's argument. Much of the symmetry of the tower's collapse simply came because they were 4-sided towers, and as the perimeter walls were peeled off in the 4 directions, that's pretty much how the debris landed. But that's only a starting point, and the distribution was much more chaotic than that. Now this object is symmetrical, and so is this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. This spiral shows rotational symmetry. Now this bubble is not symmetrical. And this shape, the debris pattern of World Trade Center 2, is not symmetrical. Neither is the debris pattern of World Trade Center 1. So the tower collapses were not symmetrical, despite Mr. Fullerton's assertions that they were. There is lots of evidence that the basic mainstream explanation is valid. There is evidence that the perimeter walls were pulled inward, and there is actual photographic evidence of sagging trusses. Also, we've known since the Civil War that steel beams heated for an hour in a normal fire don't melt, but they indeed lose their structural strength.
Basically, you take the wooden cross ties and you stack them sort of in a A-frame, and then you take all your rails, lay them on top, then you start a fire.
How long did it take to get the rails hot enough to bend?
Well, I would say about an hour. All right, we got to do this thing. These guys are getting overheated. Okay. Every other man face the other direction. On the count of 3, we're lifting. 1, 2, 3.
All right, that's good, that's good.
Mr. Fullerton's other main point was that the entire history of the controlled demolition industry indicates that the Twin Towers were brought down by a controlled demolition.
The entire history of building controlled demolition supports the notion that these buildings could have come down by controlled demolition. There has never, ever been a case where a skyscraper has come down in a similar manner as the Twin Towers without using some form of controlled demolition.
I certainly don't agree. In fact, conventional controlled demolitions are always accompanied by insanely loud bangs. Was anything like that heard in Manhattan on the morning of September 11th, 2001? Let's listen. If 9/11 was a controlled demolition, where are the insanely loud bangs? What did Mr. Fullerton say about explanations that don't explain all the available observations?
If there are observations which the explanation cannot account for, this shows that the explanation is wrong and must either be discarded or changed to accommodate these observations.
It gets even worse for 9/11 truth regarding controlled demolitions. It turns out there is a method of controlled demolition that is very quiet. It basically involves the destruction of one floor, and then the upper section demolishes the lower section, much as what happened on 9/11 in Manhattan. This technique, developed by the French, is called vernage. In his first debate segment, Michael Fullerton committed several logical fallacies. Stay tuned for Mr. Fullerton's brief response to this video, and then I'll have one more response after that. See you on the YouTube, and subscribe to the NMSR.